It is the 8th of the 10th, 2025. The time is 25 minutes to 9. That means only one thing. As always, there are a multitude of F1 centric things at which we need to pull your main event, your main course, even though this evening is Zak Brown settings chaos. We're going to put on our investigative F1 caps here and connect some causation dots, because Zak Brown's second day in court talking about Alex Palou pleading with the court to give them money, 20.7 million US dollars around Alex Palou and lost earnings in sponsorship. It's techie, this chat. I'm telling you, this one's really techie. We're gonna have to go through it, I swear. I don't want to read out to you, but this is so techie. Motorsport Rights by James Elson that Zak Brown denies destroying evidence in McLaren case against Alex Palou. Well, you'll see in a couple of minutes how valid that claim is, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury. Proper this time. McLaren F1 Racing CEO Zak Brown was accused in court of deleting crucial WhatsApp messages on his day of giving evidence in a $20.7 million case between his team and IndyCar champion Alex Palou. So the context is key. Alex Palou was due to go racing with McLaren Racing, the IndyCar faction of... But then he realised, again, he'd always harboured aspirations to be a Formula One driver. That was the plan, the succession plan. And then what did Zak Brown do? He went and signed Oscar Piastri. So Alex Palou was like, hang on, there's no room at the McLaren F1 in any longer. So why am I going to go over to that team? You promised me something and you reneged, so I'm not going. Zak Brown said, all right then, if you're going to be in breach of contract and cost us sponsorship money, then I will see you in court to the tune of 20.7 million US dollars or 15.43 million Great British pounds. This is the second day in court and it gets more and more salacious. Zak Brown puts himself forth as a commercial mind, a god-tier businessman. He did brilliant as far as saving McLaren, getting them back on the right track, Constructors' Championship back to back now. And again, there was a while back there when financial resources were slim on the ground. Title sponsors Google Chrome were having words. When are you going to turn this around? When are we going to see our sponsors, our logo even, on a championship winning car? You've seen it on Netflix Drive to Survive that Mr. Zak Brown was having to appease these guys to keep McLaren on the right financial footing. However, now this is where it gets techier than techie things. Why? Well, because F1's always been a piranhas, that these things always have gone on. Crashgate, Spygate, do we need to go on? Now though, Motorsport Rights of Zak Brown's second day in court that the McLaren F1 racing boss Zak Brown has denied destroying evidence in relation to his team's legal case against IndyCar Alex Palou. The four-time champion reneged on his agreement to drive for McLaren's IndyCar outfit in 2024, leading the team to claim 20.7 million US dollars or 15.43 million Great British pounds in damages from Palou and his associated management companies who dispute the level of damages. So we're talking about a difference now in extent and not kinds. $20.7 million sounds like a lot of money, for loss in earnings. But Brown, continues motorsport.com, Motorsport Magazine, returned to the stand at the High Court for a second day of giving evidence and was confronted with a series of WhatsApp messages. Let's go! Not long after, it was Christian Horner and the WhatsApp messages and all of the salacious circumstance that those comes with. Now we've got Zak Brown on the docket, pleading innocence as far as deleted messages, disappearing ones. Brown returned to the stand at the High Court for a second day of giving evidence and was confronted with a series of WhatsApp messages submitted at the last minute by Palou's legal team just before Wednesday afternoon session. They featured former McLaren IndyCar team manager Gavin Ward telling a contact that McLaren used WhatsApp's disappearing message function, which deletes conversation after a set period, to cover their ass on lawsuits. I ask you to view this evidence through the lens of favoritism. Singapore Grand Prix. I'm not saying that definitively there is favoritism, that Lando Norris is the chosen, but if a dude like this will behave like this at the altar of Alex Palou, 20.7 million US dollars, then surely something as relatively innocent as favoritism, particularly at the altar of financial resource and commercial value, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes, you couldn't bet against it being a possibility. I'm read this again because this is where it gets techie. Gavin Ward, McLaren IndyCar team manager, Gavin Ward telling a contact that McLaren used WhatsApp's disappearing messages function, which deletes conversations after a set period, to quote, cover their ass on lawsuits, unquote. The court was also shown an exchange where Zak Brown tells recipients to use the encrypted messaging platform in August 2023, just before Palou's decision to remain with Chip Ganassi Racing becomes public. The message from Brown also tells team members to delete the exchanges. Really, is that how we're going on, Zak Brown? And it gets techier than techie things. Brown was once again cross-examined by Palou's barrister Nick DeMarco Casey following a series of testy exchanges the previous day. You're talking rubbish, the Casey told Zak Brown. No, you're talking rubbish, Zak Brown responded. Screenshots from Ward's phone were shown. Here we go. Here we go. Are you ready to get techier than techie things? Screenshots from Ward's phone were shown to the court. This is where it gets techie thing. The next post, here we go. So this is Zak Brown's. Can you imagine? You can't even make this up. It couldn't even get more salacious if you tried. You can't write this in a book, for they would not believe you. Next post was Brown instructing his team to keep all communications on the subject WhatsApp and to delete all messages relating to it once they had been sent. Lauren Gaudian, whoever that is, says the password for the document is Palou. Of course it is. Keep everything WhatsApp and delete our response. Jeez, you can't even. Why are we privy to all this chaos? It's too much. Keep everything WhatsApp and then delete. I'll respond to my messages. Here we go. I'll respond any changes on here. There's another set of messages though. And again, this isn't Zak Brown. This is the one that they call Gavin Ward having communication with Jeff Papa. And I think this is a bit more salacious. And the key bits at the bottom here, really. Mandated disappearing messages, really. And then you can see, yep, to cover their asses on lawsuits. Talk about a red flag. Cover their asses. Brown was asked shortly thereafter by his own representatives if he had turned on disappearing messages to cover his asses. Or their asses, our asses. No, replied Zak Brown. It's getting techier than techie things. And let me tell you why. Context is key here as far as all this back and forth. Disappearing messages, salaciousness. Maybe nothing untoward is going on here, but it definitely looks and smells like there is a rat. It feels like Crashgate all of a sudden. Straight up and down. Zak Brown in court talking about disappearing messages. WhatsApp. That's what the headlines will say. Jomo, techier than techie things, mate, this Zak Brown thing. And I want to see how it's going to end. Oh, and by the way, the only reason why I show you this, I say all of the aforementioned as far as Zak Brown, second day in court, Alex Palou, 21 million US dollars to say this. You'll recall this race weekend, it was Singapore Grand Prix. And now there are conversations, questions being asked around McLaren and the Papaya rules that they so hold themselves accountable to. Race fair, race hard, do not touch. But it feels like as far as consistency, McLaren, Zak Brown and Andreas Stella keep doing one of these. Zak Brown post-race had this to say. They raced hard and they raced fair. Well, did they? Zak Brown, what race were you watching, sir? Lando Norris's move, granted there was no malicious intent in there, of course there wasn't, but nevertheless he did touch. So how then could you call that fair racing, sir? Lest you wish to be deemed sons devoid now of objectivity. It feels and looks like there's bias. We've talked about this ad infinitum now. Oscar Piastri's team potentially having words with Scuderia Ferrari. So fuming are they at the circumstance over at McLaren. And for good reason. I would argue the password to the PC Windows 11 is McLaren just signed up French Motel as their fuel partner. So go on then. And this is where it gets techier than techie things. Here's my supposition if we're playing hypothetical games. I was watching adverts. I've seen a load of adverts over the past couple of weeks around McLaren, but with only one driver in them. He has a name, and his name is Lando Norris, as if all of the commercial partners only want Lando and don't want Oscar in them. Where is the advert with Oscar and Lando? I saw one with Oscar, and he wasn't by himself. He was a supporting role actor. It was Lando, Lando, Lando. Oh, and look, here's Oscar in the background. You can go and check it out for yourself. It's on YouTube. It's a Hilton advert. I thought, let me just make a collage of all the Lando Norris adverts with him front and center. And again, we have this conversation under the umbrella heading of commerciality. If Zak Brown is prepared to be in court talking about 21 million US dollars at the altar of lost earnings with disappearing messages on WhatsApp, and also that they can cover their asses, do you not think for a second that the one that they call Zak Brown would not be prepared to sacrifice Oscar Piastri's driver championship if he had the chance at the altar of the commerciality of Lando? No, here are all the ads. You can't even believe the plenitude of ads where it's Lando front and center. Roll the clip.
Yeah.
There's a kissing scene apparently.
Right, I'm off. That's me for the day, signing.
That's two already. Got OPM London, and then you've got Hilton. Roll the clip. Hilton again, yeah. You see where we're going with this?
I say racing makes me feel many things. But the
Ralph Lauren, yeah. Continue, Lando.
when the visor goes down, it's a different mentality. Because it's just you and your car. And the red light's going out. Then it's game on. It's that fine line of perfection and going over the limit. That's the place you want to be at all times. Polo red. Bold, energizing, always creates a little bit more of a lasting smell.
Who speaks the most language?
Listen to me. It's techier than techie things. Ergo, I only say that to say this. Lando Norris's commerciality is doing one of these. A rising Lando Norris tide floats all F1 financial boats. That's the dude that you're going to put in front of the camera. Lando Norris is the dude that you're going to send to British Vogue. He is that guy after a Sir Lewis Hamilton that will cross over F1 into the mainstream. You will see Lando Norris on Jimmy Kimmel and Saturday Night Live and bloody all of the mainstream media programs that matter, because he is that guy. Good looking, cheeky chappy, a marketer's dream. And again, this isn't me talking about Lando as a driver, because when he's at his Weetabix, he's also very good, but not without his foibles, the ability to execute, etc. We've talked about those things ad nauseum. However, what's important here is that you understand that Lando Norris, with him comes a level of commerciality and stake, shareholder value that Oscar Piastri just can't deliver upon. He doesn't have that look. A brilliant racing driver. He'll be better when all's said and done than Lando Norris could ever be. More mental fortitude, more stoic, more level-headed. Brilliant as far as his ability to place the car in the clutchest of clutch moments. That's who Oscar Piastri is. But are you going to see him on Ralph Lauren anytime soon before he wins a championship? I do not think so. And here's my final supposition, and here's why this matters. Because if Zak Brown knows on which side his bread is buttered, if he considers for a second fiduciary responsibility and duty, that is to grow shareholders' value and make sure that McLaren, as he has always been doing, have ticked and crossed, dotted all of their financial I's and crossed all of their financial T's, he will know that McLaren as an entity are infinitely more worthwhile, more valuable as an asset, with a driver's champion in Lando Norris, who is infinitely more marketable than Oscar Piastri. We can argue this back and forth, but that's just the bottom line. Why would Ralph Lauren have him front and centre? Why then would he be on British Vogue with Oscar Piastri nowhere to be seen? This isn't me saying Oscar Piastri isn't a better driver than Lando, or at least when they're at the same level of experience, won't be. Of course he will be. He's a brilliant driver, but there is something to be said for commerciality. Wu-Tang once said upon a time, right, that cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bills, and that's never been more pertinent and truthful on the nose than when you're talking about the weird and wacky world that is the F1s. Between now and race 24, Abu Dhabi, 6 to go, it will get techier than techie things. And if Zak Brown knows on which side his commercial bread is buttered, I think it might get only more techie for Oscar Piastri, because they will have, if fiduciary duty is a thing and growing shareholder value is equally as important, Zak Brown will have to, somewhere deep within, be rooting for the commercial superstar, Mr. Mainstream crossover, British Vogue, the one that they call Lando Norris, to go and win himself a driver's championship. Can you spell, therefore, favoritism at the altar of commerciality? Oh, the humanity.